So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Today, we will be discussing about post-impressionism, specifically its origin of the movement, philosophy and characteristics of the style, and the important artists and seminal works. Now, let's focus on the origin. You see, Roger Fry, a British art critic, first used the term post Impressionism to characterize the mainly painting movements that were popular in France from the mid to late 1880s to the early 90s. The work he has at the year 1910 planned an independent organized show called Manet and the Post Impressionists. Edouard Manet and lesser known, more contemporary artists were on display in the exhibition. Fry shared that post Impressionist view that beauty in art is fundamentally a matter of perception. It started in the year 1886 as a revolt by independent painters in France who were dissatisfied with Impressionism's lack of emotion and subjective meaning. Post Impressionists preferred to concentrate more on the issue at hand as opposed to only attempting to freeze the ephemeral light and color. The post Impressionists were not a cohesive group with a single subjective. Rather, they were a collection of independent artists who were only loosely related by a shared dislike of Impressionism. In the same way as the Impressionists did, they utilized vivid colors and powerful strokes. However, they preferred a focus on formal order, structure, and greater symbolic substance. Due to this, as well as its obvious symbolic meaning and broad emphasis on abstract qualities, Neo Impressionism, Symbolism, Cloisonnism, and Synthesism are only a few examples of sub movements that fall within the post Impressionist umbrella.
The phrase Post-Impressionism is typically used to refer to the four key individuals who developed and expanded Impressionism. So, with the exceptions of Van Gogh, all these painters were French and created their own distinctive styles of art that rocked the art world. This is important because Paris was the center of Post-Impressionism. The location of the movement places an emphasis on symbolic and expressive content as life in the city was no longer dominant for post-impressionists. So, Fry best describes post-impressionism in his essay in aesthetics as he emphasizes it as the medium of expressing and stimulating imagination, valuing emotion for its own sake, and transforming aesthetically chaotic elements into harmony, essentially providing a common thread that connects various artists to another. So, unfortunately, um, Post Impressionism as an art movement died in 1905 with the birth of Fauvism. Despite that, the movement's influence was still felt throughout all Europe, giving rise to a wide range of movements such as early Expressionism, Italian Divisionism, Jugendstil, and avant-garde ensembles like Le Vinge and many others.
Now, Post Impressionism had this philosophy that color could be independent of form and composition as an emotional and aesthetic bearer of meaning. Post Impressionists wanted to test and explore the creative mind of artists by not really restricting themselves to one single approach in making art, by using their emotions rather than focusing on realism. It mainly expands the use of different types of vivid colors with the use of thick application of paint and distinctive brushstrokes so as to kind of add more texture and a sense of depth, more so compared to the works of impressionists. Post impressionists even were more inclined to emphasize geometric forms as they believed that distorted forms will lead to a more expressive effect. They took advantage of bright colors and bold strokes, much like the Impressionists did, but specifically they favored an emphasis on more symbolic content, formal order, and structure.
Post-Impressionism expanded and developed further the style that Impressionists used in their art by opening and not limiting themselves to be realistic. They went ahead and introduced new perspectives to the art, whilst retaining the original style, which used light and varying forms of color. Colors used by the Post-Impressionists tended to be saturated and contained a wide range of hues in order to showcase their creative depictions. Their goal was to convey emotion and feelings through the abstraction of everyday scenes in life.
The works of prominent post-impressionist artists such as Paul Cézanne, Vincent van Gogh, and Paul Gauguin were particularly influential. Paul Cézanne is considered the father of post-impressionism and a major influence on modern art. He sought to create a synthesis between the natural and geometric forms of the world, resulting in a more abstract and emotive style of painting. Vincent van Gogh was a passionate, prolific artist whose use of thick, vibrant brushstrokes and bold colors helped to define post-impressionism. He famously declared that his paintings were meant to express his internal struggles and emotions rather than faithfully reproducing the external world. Vincent van Gogh's most famous works are arguably The Starry Night and Sunflowers, both of which are iconic depictions of his emotional and expressive style. The Starry Night is particularly striking with its swirling night sky and its use of light to create a feeling of movement. Paul Gauguin was another major figure in the post-impressionism movement, who was renowned for his use of bold, flat colors and intense, often symbolic imagery. His works were intended to evoke spiritual, emotional, and intellectual responses in the viewer, rather than a literal representation of reality. Paul Gauguin's works are known for their vivid colors and exotic subject matter. His most famous works include The Vision After the Sermon and Where Do We Come From, What Are We, Where Are We Going? Other famous seminal works were by Georges Seurat and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. Seurat's works explored the effects of color and light in painting. His most famous works include A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte, which is a masterpiece of pointillism, while Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec also used a unique style of painting with bold colors, thick lines, and flattened figures. He is known for his iconic depictions of Parisian nightlife. His most famous works include At the Moulin Rouge and The Laundress. What makes these works so special is their ability to capture the emotions and feelings of the artist in the most vivid way possible. Each artist used their own unique style and technique to express something that could not be expressed with words.
Another post-impressionist artist was Paul Signac. He was a French painter and graphic artist who actually wanted to become a writer, but later decided to take up painting after seeing Claude Monet's first impressionist paintings. His encounter with Georges Seurat in 1884 changed his life and his style of painting, and both of them did research into color and the effects of color contrast, eventually developing a new style of painting that later became as pointillism. The technique involved in this style consisted of mixing colors with white only and applying this directly into small dots onto the canvas, and when viewed from a distance, the colors merged together in the eye of the observer. Paul Signac eventually became the theorist of this movement, which would have a big influence on the works of other artists such as Vincent van Gogh and Piet Mondrian. Some of his famous works include Breakfast, or sometimes called Dining Room, Woman at the Well, The Red Boy, The Papal Palace, Avignon, etc. Many of his paintings convey deeply colorful scenes, so to the viewers, this is certainly a wonderful artistic experience. Supposedly, there may be hidden meanings in his paintings, like The Breakfast or Dining Room. The painting is said to be a critical commentary on the self-satisfaction of civic life and a rejection of authoritarian capitalism, which Signac, a confirmed anarchist, was against.
In conclusion, for our group, the best word to describe post-impressionism is innovative, as it ushered in a time where the function of a painting was changed for the better, as rather than just being a representation of an object, It became a way to illustrate the thoughts of the artist both in spirit and mind. Likewise, Post-Impressionism was also significantly able to affect future art movements around the turn of the 20th century through Expressionism and Feminist art, all of whom continue to have an impact to the art world till this day.